Hello and welcome to the traffic informational meeting for the Sundance Meadows preliminary plat. My name is Ann Winkler. I'm a traffic engineer at Sunburst Engineering, and under ordinary circumstances I would present this information to you in person, but due to the COVID-19 restrictions, I'll be presenting the information in this format. Please feel free to pause the presentation at any time you want to look at the data in more detail. Also, look at the other sections on this website. There's a lot of information for your perusal. Thanks so much. Let's begin. Sundance Meadows is a plat of the property previously known as the Sundance Golf Course. It is located on 9 Mile Road, which is a state route known as State Route 291 or SR 291. It lies in Spokane County, as denoted in the green. The yellow is also Spokane County. The more orangey color is City of Spokane property. It also lies in the 9 Mile Falls School District. On the north side, it is bounded by platted single-family lots that have been in place for many years. The south likewise is fully bounded by single-family homes. On the other side of the highway, the land is vacant. It's all owned by one family and has never had development on it. To the west, the property falls steeply away and is owned by the state. At the present time, this is the layout of the preliminary plat. Now, some of you may have seen a previous plat layout that showed things such as townhouses, row houses, small lots, that kind of thing. That is no longer under consideration, and what is planned here is single-family homes available to all age groups. There are two access points shown on the right side of the screen that are planned to Highway 291 or 9 Mile Road. The south one is called Teepee Avenue, and the north one is called Red Cloud Avenue. Those names are continuation of streets up on Indian Trail Road and were chosen in the customary manner of Spokane County. On the left side of your screen, you'll see two stub roads that go to the state property. At the present time, they don't tie into anything, but they do provide future access if any is needed. On the south side of the plat, there is a small access road into the site that has been used previously for golf cart access to the golf course. At this time, it's not planned to extend that onto the site, and if it was extended, it would be used for pedestrian and bike access only. It's not wide enough for vehicular access. I'm going to go through the schedule for a minute just so we have an idea of where we are in the project. This project did begin some time ago. In the summer of 2017, I prepared and submitted a trip generation and distribution letter. That document is fairly short, but it does describe how much traffic will be generated by the site and in general ways where the traffic will go. In order to determine the distribution or which direction the traffic is going to go, I actually counted which way the traffic went at Kindick and Highway 291. And I was surprised. It was 18% going to and from the north and 82% going to and from the south. That was consistent both AM and PM, both entering and exiting, and that's what was used in this study. The next thing that happened was in the spring of 2018 when the amount of traffic that will be generated by this and the distribution of that traffic was brought forward to Spokane County as the approving agency of the preliminary plat, the City of Spokane, because they are a nearby agency and will receive a great deal of the traffic generated by this plat, and the DOT, who is providing direct infrastructure and from whom we need to get access permission. I'll go over what the scope that we came up with them in just a minute here, after we go through the schedule. In June 2018, I counted the intersections, I counted the traffic volumes at the intersections that were included in the original scope. Next, the next thing that happened was that we had a traffic scoping meeting that was in December 2018, and there were some things that the agencies asked me to include in the traffic study. So that necessitated additional counts, which were collected in February of 2019. Also, after the scoping meeting, we verified the changes, the requested changes to the scope of the meeting, scope of the study with the agencies. And they agreed with some and they didn't agree with others. And so the scope was expanded, obviously, if we had to do more counts. Early in 2019, the original owner of the plat decided to step aside, and he sold the plat to another developer. And so the plat went from being known as Sundance West, and it became Sundance Meadows, as you see today. Shortly after the ownership changed and the field counts had been collected, the initial traffic impact analysis, or TIA, was submitted. And during the spring and summer, the agencies reviewed that document. It was then, there were substantial revisions requested to the document, and it took quite a bit of time to prepare a revised TIA to address all of the agency comments. The next thing that happened was at the intersection of 9 Mile Road and 7 Mile Road, which some of you have probably noticed isn't operating in the most straightforward manner, was separated into a separate document, and the analysis of that was prepared by Whipple Consulting Engineers and submitted under separate cover. Note that that document is included on this website, so please refer to that. The new and improved and expanded documents were then reviewed by the agencies, and there were some final negotiations and correspondence back and forth, and the report, along with the supplemental documents, were accepted by the various agencies. That brought us to where we are today, the traffic informational, or second traffic meeting. Now, there are 3 agencies. Not all of them have written their conditions of approval. Some of them are still planning to do that. And these conditions of approval will be based on the information in the traffic impact analysis, and will allow the hearing examiner who hears the preliminary plat proposal to make a determination of what needs to happen there. Assuming that the preliminary plat is approved with substantial conditions of approval, after that time, various plans, stormwater plans, sewer plans, water plans, the final plat, etc., will begin, and the project will move forward. As I mentioned previously, the original scope of the study was determined through a meeting with the county, the City of Spokane, and the DOT. It included the 6 intersections that you see here, which include the 2 access points previously mentioned, the intersection of 7 Mile Road and 9 Mile Road, the intersection of Rifle Club Road and 9 Mile Road, the intersection of 9 Mile and Francis, which is at the northern end of Assembly, and then the intersection of Assembly and Francis, which is at the northern end of Driscoll Boulevard. The purpose of this meeting is twofold. The first is to share how the information received at the scoping meeting was used in the report and throughout the report and through the processing of the TIA. And secondly, to share the results of the traffic impact analysis that was conducted for this project. Note that if you have public input, the hearing examiner will be happy to take that. That hearing will be at Spokane County, and the noticing will be very similar to what you received for this meeting. There will be a sign on the site with the date and time and place. There will be an ad in the newspaper with same information, and if you live within 400 feet of the site, you will get a notice in the mail about that hearing. Let's talk first about the input that was received at the scoping meeting and how that was handled. So one of the first things that people asked was, can we include the intersection of Highway 291 and Charles Road? And the answer to that was emphatically yes. We will absolutely include that. That is a location where the grade school traffic from this site, all the grade schoolers will use that intersection, as well as the other school-age children who are continuing through. It's also one of the first intersections that you come to north of the site, and as I mentioned before, 18% of the traffic will go that way. The second was to include intersections on Assembly Road south of Francis, and that was proposed to the city, and the city said, no, we don't feel like that needs to be included. The third thing was including intersections on Francis Avenue east of Assembly, and the city said, yes, we should look at the intersection of Francis and Alberta. I know there were some other intersections that were requested, and the city said that Francis and Alberta was where we needed to focus our attention. The next thing that was brought forward was including vested projects. The next issue that was brought forward was including vested projects in Airway Heights. Airway Heights is more than 10 miles away, and it was thought that instead of identifying those specific projects, that we should include those in the ambient increase in traffic that we're going to see over the next few years. So that's how it was handled, that it's not specifically included, but there is a growth factor that will include increases in traffic from all different sources. Next thing was there were emergency access concerns. As I explained previously, there are 2 stub roads to the west and the 2 access points to Highway 291. And we've really maximized what we can do as far as accessing the site, given the existing configurations. They also wanted to talk about the Highway 291 various characteristics, bike lanes or lack thereof, the speed of the road, the right-of-way width, the parking, etc. And that's included later in the report. There was even more input, including school bus issues. So will the school bus come and pick up children from here? The answer is yes. The school district will serve the site. There was also some concern about overcrowding at the schools and those kinds of things. And the school district will be notified about the hearing and has the ability to write proposed conditions to the hearing examiner for consideration. They also wanted to know if STA, the Spokane Transit Authority, would extend a bus route here. Every time STA is approached about this, they make it very clear that they make their own decisions about routes, but the more population that there is in an area, the more likely it is that a bus route will get extended. The next thing people were worried about was, is the sight distance acceptable at Kendick and at the two site entrances? So let's go into that in a little bit of detail. First of all, let's look at what our criteria is. It's a state highway. This is a table out of the state design manual, and as you see on the left, the design speed of the road, which it's posted at 50 miles an hour, but let's look at 55 just to make sure that we are accounting for the speed of the traffic. It says that the design stopping sight distance is 495 feet. So stopping sight distance means that a car can fully come from 55 miles an hour to 0 miles an hour and that many feet. So we're basically looking at 500 feet in each direction. So this is an aerial photo of Kendick, and it shows 500 feet each direction, and it shows that there's no issues with sight distance. So the sight distance is adequate. Next, let's look at the proposed locations. Again, another sight distance. I overlaid the Plat on top of the aerial photo, and we see again that there is adequate sight distance around this corner for those two access points. The next thing people wanted to know is Barnes Road planned to extend from Indian Trail down to 9 Mile? That was a plan previously, but at this time the city has removed that plan and is not planning to do that. At the time it would have come into 7 Mile Road, and there's no saying that it might not get added to the plan in the future. The next thing was about the 4-lane/5-lane highway. Would it be extended to the north? And the answer is no. It is not needed to extend north of 7 Mile Road. Having completed our discussion on the input received at the traffic scoping meeting, we're going to go on to the second reason to have this meeting, and that's to discuss the findings of the traffic impact analysis conducted for Sundance Meadows. Let's talk about why we would do a traffic impact analysis. It's possible that intersections near this project would fall into unacceptable, what are called levels of service, as a result of the traffic that's generated by this project. In addition to the intersections mentioned previously, as a result of the scoping meeting, there were 2 more intersections added to the study. The first was at Charles and Highway 291. The other was at Francis in Alberta. In order to determine the impact to the transportation system that the additional traffic from Sundance Meadows will have, we have to sort that out from other factors that affect the transportation system. So the first thing that we need to do is look at the existing system and see how it is functioning. I think those of you who ever drive up this way, especially in the afternoon, you know that if you're northbound on Assembly approaching Francis, that there's going to be a long line of cars and you're going to have to wait a long time. This waiting is called delay in traffic parlance, and if it gets to be too long, people will get impatient and there can start to be traffic crashes. And that's one of the things that we're trying to avoid by going through this analysis. So the second thing is to look at what the future conditions are going to look like with various vested projects that already have rights to the capacity on the road from all known sources other than Sundance Meadows. And then thirdly and lastly, to look at what the future conditions are going to be with the additional traffic generated by Sundance Meadows. In order to do this, we first of all collect the traffic volumes during the AM and PM peak hour. During the AM peak hour, we count traffic from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. And the idea with choosing that time frame is that we're going to capture people who are on their way to work. Conversely, in the afternoon, we collect traffic volumes from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. with the idea that we're going to capture traffic coming home from work. We look at the traffic characteristics such as how many be it how many big trucks are using the road, that maybe they can't slow down as fast, they can't speed up as fast. We look at pedestrian traffic and bike traffic because those do affect how many people can turn right at a stop sign, for example. If there's a pedestrian there, they have to wait longer. And how many people show up all at the same time, how much crowding there is at one time on the road. There's lots of other characteristics, but those are the main characteristics. So level of service analysis is based on a grading system. It was developed by college professors, so it's an A through F kind of system. They do include level of service E. For unsignalized intersections, the Spokane area, including the city, the county, and the DOT, have determined that level of service A through E is okay. It does not require mitigation, but level of service F does. I have been asked on occasion, why can't we have level of service C or better? Or why don't we choose a higher level of service than just that? And we do need to balance safety against cost of infrastructure. In order to go to level of service C, for example, the roads would have to be a lot wider. And that's not necessarily the best use of public money. Signalized intersections are a little bit different in that level of service E and F are both considered unacceptable, and anytime an intersection falls into one of those categories as a signalized intersection, it requires mitigation. So let's look at the traffic volumes that were collected in the field, which are shown here. Please feel free to pause this and look at them in more detail if you're interested. If you want to, they're also in the report, as previously mentioned. Feel free to look at them there. So here is a summary of the level of service at the various intersections. The letter designation on the left is for the morning commute. On the right is the afternoon commute. We'll notice that Charles and 291 is level of service C and B, indicating that there is no problem with level of service there. We see at 7 Mile and 9 Mile that we're at level service D in the morning and E in the afternoon, which means that we're approaching unacceptable levels, but at the current time it does meet standards. Rifle Club Road and 9 Mile Road is at C, level service C, during both the AM and PM peak hour. As mentioned previously, at the northern end of Assembly, where Francis meets 9 Mile, the level of service is B in the morning and F quite far into level of service F during the afternoon peak hour. The intersection of Assembly and Francis, where at the northern end of Driscoll Boulevard, is at level of service D, both AM and PM peak hours. Alberta and Francis as the only signalized intersection, it was shown to be functioning at level of service C in the morning and D in the afternoon. So again, our signalized intersection level of service C and D were okay. There's no mitigation required at this time at that intersection. The unsignalized intersections, the level of service varies from B to F, and the intersection that's at F that requires mitigation is 9 Mile and Francis. It turns out that the transportation impact fee that the city of Spokane assesses to all projects in the northwest part of Spokane, they apply it to all different areas of Spokane, but the one that's for the northwest part of Spokane has as one of their projects a project listed to change the control of that intersection to a roundabout. This is the concept. This is one of two concepts that are currently being proposed by the city of Spokane. It's the one that I assumed, I have to make some assumptions for future issues that I assumed would be chosen. Because it does, and notice that it incorporates both Assembly and Francis, and 9 Mile Road and Francis, bringing those intersections into one location. When this becomes a roundabout using the traffic volumes that we saw in the field today, the level of service would be A and B, well within acceptable levels, and a vast improvement over what we see today. So the next thing we need to look at is the future conditions without the traffic from Sundance Meadows. Again, what we're trying to do is sort out problems that exist without Sundance Meadows from problems that are made worse or that arise due to adding the traffic from Sundance Meadows. One of the things that happened after the initial submittal of the traffic impact analysis and the revised analysis was that we needed to include projects on Indian Trail. And a lot of this was driven by the addition of Francis in Alberta. There are many projects, as you see here, that are located on Indian Trail, and they add hundreds of vehicles to the intersection of Francis and Alberta during the PM peak hour and the AM peak hour. Of somewhat lesser concern are the Stevens County projects. They're just kind of lost in the shuffle there. That doesn't mean that they aren't important. And these directly will add traffic to all of 9 Mile Road, Suncrest Vistas, and Blackstone. In order to find out what projects still had lots outstanding in Stevens County, I called the county planning department, and there's about 64 lots that are outstanding. There's nothing else that's approved out that way. So we seem to be on the tail end of development out in the Suncrest area. This graphic shows the addition of the traffic expected from the various vested projects shown on the previous slide, added to the existing volumes, and then a growth factor, which for this study was scoped at 1.5% annually, which over the 5-year life of a traffic impact analysis is 7.7%. Again, feel free to stop and look at these volumes if you're interested. Otherwise, look at the report. So we find that there are some things that change. And the level of service, for example, at 7 Mile and 9 Mile falls to level of service F, both during the AM and the PM peak hour. Some intersections aren't really affected, like Charles and Highway 291, that remains at C and B. The intersection of Rifle Club Road and 9 Mile changes from C during both AM and PM peak hours to level of service C during the AM peak hour and D in the PM peak hour. The new roundabout serving Francis and 9 Mile and Assembly and Driscoll continues to work at very good levels of service, A and B. Here's where we come into a little bit of an issue with Alberta and Francis, which is level service C in the morning and E in the afternoon. It turns out that level service E, as mentioned previously, does require mitigation. Again, as we saw with the roundabout installation at Francis and 9 Mile, the city impact fee also will address this intersection. And the mitigation that's planned is to provide 2 northbound left turn lanes on Alberta at Francis. And this will allow the afternoon level of service to improve from E to D and to be within acceptable levels. For the unsignalized intersections, now that there's a roundabout at Francis and 9 Mile, that's working at level service A and B. We've got some other intersections that are at C and D, but that 9 Mile and 7 Mile intersection has fallen to F. There was some real surprise that this intersection cropped up as having issues at all. The it turns out that the county has paved part of the road that links 7 Mile to Airway Heights, as some of you know. And that has proven to be a really popular route to get to the West Plains area. This was a surprise to the DOT. They had no idea that this intersection was going to have level of service problems, and they have a lot of issues on their plate right now, especially in the Eastern District, and there is no public money available to address this situation. So as things set right now, this intersection will be functioning below acceptable levels without whether Sundance Meadows is approved or not. The DOT is taking the mindset that since this is operating below acceptable levels of service and there is no money set aside to address it at this time, if Sundance Meadows does not assist in addressing this situation, the DOT has no choice but to say that there is inadequate public facilities for the project. We'll discuss that in more detail later on. So let's talk about Sundance Meadows for a minute. 475 single-family homes will generate 352 trips during the AM peak hour and 470 trips during the PM peak hour. It's a lot of traffic, and that's why we had to do the traffic impact analysis at all. Now, we talked about the directional distribution of traffic, and as mentioned previously, from the site, we expect 18% to go north and 82% to go south. There is quite a demand currently to use 7 Mile Road. We anticipate that the new people who will locate at Sundance Meadows will have similar commuting characteristics as the existing traffic on Highway 291. So we expect 21% of the traffic to peel off on 7 Mile Road and access the West Plains or wherever else it is that they're going, and 61% to continue into the city of Spokane. At the new roundabout, or whatever the control might be, we expect that 25% will use Assembly and 36% will travel on to Francis. Using those characteristics, the traffic volumes generated by the Sundance Meadows project itself are shown on this graphic. Note in the lower left corner under each peak hour, there's a dashed box that shows some traffic volumes of the Francis and Assembly intersection separated from the 9 Mile and Francis intersection. In some ways that was put in so that the way that those traffic volumes were combined together into one intersection would be clear, and also if the city chose to reconfigure that intersection in such a way that there were still two separate intersections, they would have projected traffic volumes for that scenario. So in the future, with those traffic volumes and the improvements as previously described, we see that Charles and 291 remains at level of service C and B. The new intersections will, as a stop-controlled intersections, will function Red Cloud at level of service C and B, and TP Avenue at level of service D and C. With a roundabout, the intersection of 7 Mile and 9 Mile will operate at level of service A during both peak hours. Rifle Club Road and 9 Mile will operate at level of service C and E, both acceptable levels of service as an unsignalized intersection. The new roundabout at Francis and 9 Mile will continue to operate at level of service A and B. Alberta and Francis will continue to function at level of service C and D. So we see that the unsignalized intersections are all functioning at acceptable levels of service, and the signalized intersection likewise acceptable levels of service. So the intersections that are requiring mitigation due solely to the traffic generated by Sundance Meadows are none. But there is mitigation that will be required. So this includes fringe improvements, which includes a separated pedestrian/bike pathway, and there is a possibility in the future, if development was to happen across the street from Sundance Meadows, that a roundabout might be needed at Highway 291 and TP. So we have to make sure that there's enough right-of-way so that that roundabout could be installed in the future by other people. There also needs to be a southbound right turn pocket on SR 291 at TP Avenue. Again, we had to go through a supplemental analysis of that specific issue, and that's included in the traffic impact analysis. We do need to pay the proportional transportation mitigation fee to the city of Spokane. Clearly, we are benefiting by that fee through the installation of a roundabout at Assembly Francis 9 Mile Driscoll and the construction of the 2 northbound left turn lanes on Alberta and Francis. Paying this fee helps make those projects happen. The next thing that is a mitigation measure for Sundance Meadows is the construction of a compact roundabout at 9 Mile Road and 7 Mile Road. As mentioned previously, it goes to a level of service F, not necessarily because of the traffic from the project, but nevertheless, it does go to level of service F. Something needs to be done, but we are recommending that that be done at the completion of 125 lots. We want to make sure that that compact roundabout can happen, and allowing the developer to put some money aside for that enables that mitigation measure to be put in place. With that, we really thank you for your attendance. Thanks for your interest in this project. And as mentioned previously, there will be a hearing in front of the hearing examiner, and there will be opportunity for input at that time. So keep an eye on the legal section in the newspaper, the sign that's posted on the site, and also if you live within 400 feet, you will get a notice in the mail regarding that hearing. Thanks so much.